I was standing barefoot on the cool marble floor of my penthouse when the notification buzzed again. Another message request. Another shocked reaction. Another, is this really your place, Ava? The sun had just started dipping behind the skyline, brushing gold across the glass towers outside my floor-to-ceiling windows. From the 42nd floor, the city looked soft, almost forgiving. Funny, considering it was the same city that watched me claw my way up from nothing. I smoothed the front of my silk blouse, soft cream, still warm from the afternoon light, and took a slow breath. I wasn't supposed to post the view today. It was impulsive, a 2-second decision while sipping iced coffee and trying to distract myself from the ache I'd been ignoring all week. My graduation had been 3 days ago. My name, Ava Collins, echoed across the auditorium while an empty row sat waiting for a family who never showed. I smiled for the cameras anyway. But this morning, when I opened Instagram, something inside me hardened. All those years of silence, of dismissiveness, of being the afterthought, it pressed against my chest until my finger hovered over share. And I did it. I posted the view. The caption was simple, finally home. Now my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The latest message was from my older sister, Emily. Ava, call me. We need to talk. Mom is freaking out. I let the phone buzz in my hand. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one trembling. The city outside glittered like it already knew what was coming next. Your move, I thought. I wasn't always the girl with a penthouse view. Before the marble floors and skyline sunsets, there was a cramped house in Cedar Grove with peeling wallpaper, mismatched plates, and a family that only saw value in what they understood. And they never understood me. I was 18 when the real break began. I still remember the night, late May, humid air, the smell of rain sitting heavy outside our kitchen window. I had just told my parents I wanted to major in architectural design at NYU. My hands were shaking so hard I had to tuck them under the table. Dad didn't look up from the mail. Architecture? Ava, that's not realistic. Mom sighed like I'd confessed to a crime. Sweetie, you're not built for that. You're too quiet, too sensitive. Pick something stable. Emily, sitting across from me, snorted into her iced tea. Yeah, like business or nursing. Something normal. Their words hit harder than they realized. I'd spent years sketching buildings in the margins of my notebooks, tracing skylines on the back of receipts, dreaming in angles and light. But in that room, with their voices overlapping, dismissing, diminishing, I felt myself shrinking. You're not listening, I whispered. My throat felt thick, like I was trying to speak around a fist. Dad finally glanced up. We are listening. We just know better. That was the moment something cracked inside me. Later that night, I sat on the porch steps, blinking back tears, when my grandmother, my dad's mother, Eleanor, joined me. She carried a small tin box painted with fading roses. I heard, she said softly. I didn't trust my voice enough to reply. She opened the tin and pulled out a delicate, old silver compass. The metal was worn smooth, edges rounded from decades of being held. She placed it gently in my palm. This belonged to your grandfather, she said. He used it every day when he was building the cabins upstate. He always said the compass doesn't tell you where to go, it just reminds you that you can. I closed my fingers around it. The weight was small but grounding. You're stronger than they see, she said. And you don't owe anyone permission to dream. Those words, they stayed with me. Even now. The next morning, I packed 2 suitcases before sunrise. I didn't slam doors, didn't leave a dramatic note. I simply slipped out while the house slept. The compass hung from a chain around my neck, tapping lightly against my collarbone as I walked toward the bus station. It was the first time I realized, if I wanted a future, I'd have to build it myself. New York didn't welcome me with open arms. It met me with skyscrapers that made me feel microscopic, subway stations that smelled like metal and rain, and a loneliness so sharp it felt like it lived under my skin. But even then, stepping into the city felt like stepping into possibility. I rented a room in a 6th-floor walk-up in Brooklyn, tiny, drafty, with floors that groaned louder than my doubts. My roommate, a senior named Jordan Lee, barely slept and lived off black coffee and leftover Thai food. She was the first person in the city who didn't make me feel small. "You designed?" she had asked, pointing at the sketches spilling out of my backpack. "Trying to," I'd said. She smiled. "Trying is how everyone starts." I worked 3 jobs my first semester: hostess, barista, and part-time library assistant. My feet were constantly blistered, my eyelids perpetually heavy. I'd come home with my hair smelling like espresso and my notebooks full of half-drawn ideas. Some nights, exhaustion sat on my chest like a weight. I'd stare at my reflection, puffy-eyed, messy bun, chipped nail polish, and wonder if Mom had been right. But then I'd reach for the compass. The cool silver against my palm reminded me of Eleanor's voice, steady and warm. "You don't need permission to dream." My first real break came in sophomore year. A visiting professor, Clara Monroe, was reviewing student portfolios. She stopped at mine, brow furrowing not in confusion, but interest. "Who taught you shadow mapping like this?" she asked. "No one," I said, nervous. "I just practiced." She gave a short, impressed laugh. "Keep practicing. You have an eye most people would kill for." Clara became more than a professor, she became a mentor. She pushed me, challenged me, tore apart my designs, and made me rebuild them stronger. When I apologized for mistakes, she'd say, "Good. Mistakes mean you're moving." There were still struggles, of course. Clients canceling at the last minute. Male interns speaking over me. Nights when imposter syndrome was so loud, I could barely think over it. I cried into cheap takeout more times than I'll ever admit. But slowly, wins started to appear. My first paid project, renovating the lobby of a small tech startup. My first published design, featured in an online architecture journal. My first real check, $8,000 that felt like $1 million. And I didn't tell my family a single thing. When they called, which was rare, I kept it surface level. "School is fine. Work is good. Yes, I'm managing." I stopped posting photos of late nights in the studio or the awards I quietly won. I posted sunsets, coffee cups, blurry pictures of sidewalks. Safe, small, forgettable things. Because I knew how they operated. The moment they saw value in me was the moment they'd try to claim it. So I built my life in silence. Brick by brick. Design by design. The year after graduating, I pitched a proposal for a luxury waterfront project, a long shot beyond anything I'd attempted. When they called to say I'd won the contract, I slid down my apartment wall and cried until I couldn't speak. That contract led to another, then another, and eventually the penthouse. My secret sanctuary above the city that once intimidated me. All mine. Built by my own hands. Unposted. Unmentioned. Until 3 days after graduation. When my family finally decided they wanted to see me, it wasn't because they missed me. It was because my Instagram post had gone viral among our old neighbors. They thought I was house-sitting. They thought it was a hotel. They thought it was a filtered fantasy. They did not think it was mine. So when Emily texted, "We're driving to the city. Be ready," I felt something cold and steady settle in my chest. Not fear. Not anger. Readiness. I told them to meet me at my building lobby at 4 p.m. At exactly 3:59, they walked in, Mom clutching her purse like she expected the city to steal it, Dad looking around with thin-lipped disapproval, Emily tapping her acrylic nails on her phone, pretending she wasn't rubbernecking the luxury around her. "Wow," she muttered. "This place is intense." The lobby was polished limestone and warm lighting, with a chandelier that looked like floating glass petals. A concierge stood behind a marble desk, greeting residents by name. When he greeted me, "Good afternoon, Miss Collins. Do you need the car brought around later?" My family froze. "Miss Collins." Like I belonged here. I smiled politely. "No, thank you. They're with me." We took the private elevator up. Mom kept glancing at my shoes, designer, though I doubted she knew the brand. Dad was reading the plaque inside the elevator about the building's award-winning architecture. Emily pretended not to care, but her eyes were everywhere. The elevator dinged softly at the 42nd floor. When the doors opened directly into my penthouse foyer, all three of them stepped back like they'd been pushed. Sunlight washed over the open space. White oak floors, soft neutral furnishings, modern art from local women artists, brass fixtures that caught the light perfectly. The city spread beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows, stretching in glittering patterns toward the river. "Welcome," I said. Mom blinked rapidly. "Ava, whose place is this?" "Mine." The silence that followed felt almost tender. Dad's brow furrowed. "You're renting this?" "I own it." Mom pressed a hand to her chest. "You bought. Ava, this has to be millions." "For 0.8, I said, voice even. Closing was last fall." Emily looked physically short-circuited. "How? Like how?" "You were always broke. You were struggling. You were working," I corrected. "A lot." I walked them through the space slowly, letting it all sink in. The minimalist kitchen with matte black appliances. The office lined with my project models. The framed covers of architectural magazines where my designs had been featured. The award from the waterfront project sitting quietly on a shelf, gold, heavy, unmistakable. Mom reached out to touch it, her fingers trembling. "Ava, why didn't you tell us?" I let out a breath. "Because when I told you what I wanted to do, you laughed. You dismissed me. You made me feel like my dreams were embarrassing." Dad stepped forward. "We were trying to be realistic." "No," I said gently but firmly. "You were trying to make me small." Emily crossed her arms, defensive. "Okay, but you could have still kept us in the loop." I met her eyes. "Why?" "So you could call it a phase the first time I hit a setback? So you could mock me for trying something big? You never believed in me until you saw marble floors." She opened her mouth, then closed it. I walked to the window, letting the skyline reflect behind me. I didn't post the view to brag. I posted it because, for once, I wanted to celebrate something without shrinking myself. Mom's voice cracked. "We're proud of you, sweetheart." I turned, and for the first time, none of them could look away. Not from the penthouse. Not from the evidence. Not from the woman standing in front of them. "Ava," Dad said, softer than I'd heard in years. We didn't know." "I know," I replied. That was the problem. Their shock hung thick in the air. Shame, guilt, awe, confusion. But above it all, something new. Respect. Finally. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the city far below us. My family stood there, small, unsure, stripped of the certainty they'd always used to tower over me. And for the first time in my life, I felt the balance shift. I wasn't the girl begging to be believed. I was the woman deciding what came next. I gestured toward the living room, and they followed, quieter now. Mom sat on the edge of the sofa, like she wasn't sure she was allowed. Dad lowered himself into a chair with the stiffness of someone realizing the world is larger than he ever assumed. Emily hovered, arms folded tightly, her confidence cracked down the center. "I need to be honest with you," I said, taking a seat opposite them. "Things can't go back to the way they were." Mom swallowed hard. "We can do better. We just didn't realize we were hurting you." "You didn't want to realize," I corrected gently. "You only looked at me when it was convenient. When I needed support, you disappeared. When I accomplished something, you dismissed it." Dad rubbed his forehead. "Tell us what you want. We'll make it right." Those words, once unimaginable, settled heavily between us. "All right," I said. "I do have conditions." 3 pairs of eyes lifted. "First," I began, "if you want to be part of my life, you need to respect my boundaries. That means no mocking my career, no minimizing what I've achieved, no passive-aggressive comments about success being lucky. Respect is non-negotiable." Emily shifted, uncomfortable. "Okay." "Second," I said, turning to her, "you need to work on your jealousy. You've spent years tearing me down to feel bigger. That stops now. If you want a relationship with me, you're going to have to deal with your insecurities instead of using me as the target." Her lips parted, offended, then slowly closed as realization sank in. She looked away, blinking hard. And third, I continued softly, therapy. Mom's eyebrows lifted. For us. For all of us if you want. But especially for you and Dad. You raised us with this belief that dreams only count if they're familiar. That if something scares you, it must be wrong. That mindset hurt me. It hurt Emily too, even if she won't admit it. If you want a future with me, you need to unlearn that. Dad exhaled slowly, like a balloon deflating. He looked older than I remembered. If that's what it takes, we'll do it. Mom nodded, tears gathering. I'm sorry, Ava. Truly. I held her gaze. Sorry is a start, but change is the real apology. And us, Emily whispered, voice small in a way I'd never heard. Do you even want me around? I considered her. My sister had always been sharp, quick to judge, quick to laugh when I stumbled. But beneath that, I saw someone who had also been shaped by our parents' fear-based love. I want you around, I said. But only if you stop competing with me. I'm not your rival. I never was. Her chin trembled. I can try. That's all I'm asking. The room felt different now, lighter, cleaner, as if truth had opened a window. My boundaries weren't punishment. They were protection. Not just for me, but for the woman I had fought so hard to become. And for the first time, my family wasn't towering over me. They were meeting me finally, at eye level. The weeks that followed felt strangely quiet, like the emotional dust had finally settled after a storm I'd been living in for years. My family didn't disappear this time. They didn't retreat into silence or denial the way they always had when things got uncomfortable. Instead, they tried. It was subtle at first. Mom would text me short messages after her therapy sessions. I realized today that I measured your dreams by my fears. I'm sorry. Dad sent links to architecture articles, asking questions instead of giving opinions. He even admitted one evening over dinner, I thought protecting you meant limiting you. I see now it just held you back. That confession, simple, quiet, unpolished, meant more than any apology he'd given in my entire life. And Emily, she changed in the most unexpected ways. She stopped the snide comments. She caught herself when jealousy crept into her voice. She started opening up about her own insecurities, the ones she had buried under eyeliner and attitude. One night, she called just to say, I'm proud of you, Ava. I mean it. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. As for me, I found myself learning a new skill, letting people in without losing myself. I had spent so long building walls that trusting softness again felt foreign. But I reminded myself that boundaries weren't barriers. They were bridges built with intention. One evening, I stood by the penthouse window, the city shimmering below like a constellation spilled across the earth. In my hand was the old silver compass, Eleanor's compass. The metal had warmed from my touch, familiar and comforting. I traced a finger over its smooth surface and remember her voice. The compass doesn't tell you where to go. It just reminds you that you can. She never lived long enough to see this version of me. But somehow, standing there, I felt her presence, steady, proud, gentle. As if she had always known I'd find my way here. My family wasn't perfect, and maybe they never would be. But they were growing. And so was I. The distance between us wasn't gone, but it was no longer filled with bitterness. Instead, it held possibility. Something we could cross slowly, carefully, with time. I lifted the compass to my heart, letting it rest against me the way it had the night everything began. And as the skyline glowed like dawn disguised as dusk, I whispered the truth I had earned with every late night, every tear, every quiet victory. I built my own future, and I did it with grace. A final line for the woman I had become, not just strong, not just successful, but finally, beautifully, free. Top of form, bottom of form.